Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. As you can see, I am in a hotel room, but I also have a surprise. This is Agent Scully. He's been with us for about 2 weeks now. We have been in California for a long time. I am very ready to go home. I love it here. I love Northern California, but I'm just so ready to go home. We picked him up on our way here to California so we could have a few weeks to bond with him before we introduce him to our other dog, his brother, Agent Mulder. And so Mulder is at home with my friend Travis, and we've had these few weeks to get to know Agent Scully here. Look at this little guy. Is he not just the cutest thing you've ever seen? And he's very, very sassy and feisty. Can you say hi, Bubba's? Can you say hi? Look at his little teddy bear ears. Of course, you know I had to share him with you. If you're on Patreon, you've already met Scully, but this is his introduction to the channel. I know you want to lick my lipstick off, huh? I love you, buddy. Yeah, we're in love. You've probably heard about this story on the news. It's gotten a lot of press coverage. It's a really terrible story that is very recent and has not yet gone to trial. It was supposed to be a simple Saturday, the kind of summer day that families build memories around. A short hike at the Devil's Den State Park in the Boston Mountains of Arkansas. There are sandstone bluffs and water like a mirror, cicadas droning like they're stitched in the trees, and two parents with two small children set out for a fun family day of hiking. They were maybe going to go for ice cream afterwards, go back to their new house that still had that new house smell. But instead, the day took a very tragic turn. Their path narrowed and a stranger stepped out of the brush. And before they knew it, their two daughters were running up the trail, given directions that only the bravest of parents can give. Run. Their mother and father then faced the kind of horror that we only see in our nightmares. By nightfall, people would be looking at this Arkansas state park very differently. And by midweek, a suspect would be in handcuffs, chased from the trails to a barbershop. This is the story of Kristen Amanda Brink, 41, Clinton David Brink, 43, and what happened to them on the trail at Devil's Den State Park on July 26, 2025. This is the story of the Devil's Den murders. I'm your host, Stacey Lee. Let's begin. Devil's Den is the kind of park where history and geology seem to shake hands. The Boston Mountains are the northern reach of the Ozarks, and the park is a museum of weather-carved sandstone, arches, fissures, rock shelters, crevices with nicknames like Devil's Icebox. Families come for the cool shade on hot summer days. Some of the trails are short enough for little legs. Some people are there for the thrill of stepping into nature. There are canyons where you can shout and hear your own voice echo back. It's one of those parks that features the intimate and the wild. You never really lose sense that you're near a parking lot, but the trees and the sandstone cliffs make you feel like you're in another world. Devil's Den is the kind of place that makes you feel alone and kind of casts a spell on you. On that Saturday, Kristen and Clinton brought their two young daughters to share the spell. By all accounts, these are parents who do what good parents do. They matched their pace, went on a hike to their little ones. They turned the trail into a story about nature and life lessons. And people say that Kristen and Clinton's entire lives revolved around their girls. The Brinks had recently moved to nearby Prairie Grove. They were trying to move to a safer place, which makes what happens next all the more tragic. Now, they weren't alone on the trail. Other hikers noticed a man with a very intense stare. Hikers passed him on the trail, never imagining that in moments they would be calling the police. What happens next is pieced together from witness statements, forensics, and official findings. This little family walking on the trail was attacked. Clinton was attacked first. Kristen then moved the children away from the attack that was taking place and told them to run. She then turned back to try and help her husband. That is an image that will stay with me forever when I think about this case. A woman sending her little girls to run for their lives and then turning back to try and help her husband who was being viciously attacked. Kristen's whole entire existence was changed in that split-second decision not to run with her girls, but to go back and try to help her husband. The attacker had a knife. Both Clinton and Cristen were stabbed. Kristen's fatal stab wounds occurred, of course, when she turned back to help Clinton. The children ran back and got help, and they survived. It was reported that the 2 young girls were unharmed. That word unharmed carries a lot of weight. Bodies can be spared. Childhoods are something else. Within hours, the Devil's Den State Park became a grid on a map with cops and volunteers spreading out to find this attacker. Rangers closed the trailheads, state police closed roads, and parts of the park were sealed off with yellow police tape that whipped in the wind. Canine teams worked scent through the switchbacks. Drones and helicopters could be seen everywhere above the canopy of trees. The orange shirts, often worn by day hikers, were replaced with navy blue police uniforms. Visitors continued to take pictures and tried not to think about the fact that 2 people in the park to do exactly what they were doing had been taken from the earth. A place for, having sandwiches and skipping stones turned into a crime scene. On July 27th, Arkansas authorities announced the name of the victims to the media. On July 30th, a few days later, they announced that a suspect had been caught. 28-year-old Andrew James McGann of Springdale was taken into custody at Lupita's Body Salon on Huntsville Avenue in Springdale. He was apparently in the middle of getting a haircut. Witness statements and some surveillance footage had led the police to Andrew McGann. And again, we talk about this all the time on Dark Hearts. How jarring is it to realize that you're sitting in a barber shop in a safe, small American town, and there is a double murderer sitting next to you? You're sitting on a bus, you're eating in a restaurant, and then you find out later on that you were in the midst of a monster. But the truth of the matter is most arrests happen like that in a mundane location. They don't take place on rooftops like in the movies. And to me, it says a lot about this suspect that he was doing something very ordinary, like getting a haircut after he supposedly did something so awful. At the first press briefings, officials emphasized 3 pillars of the case. First, there is no known association between James McGann and the Brinks. This appears to be a totally random double murder. That is terrifying. Second, we found out there was DNA that linked McGann to the crime scene. And then the third thing we learned was that the victims had been stabbed to death. Some media outlets, citing Arkansas State Police, also reported that McGann admitted to the killings in police interviews. This is a claim, but he will most likely contest at trial. We see this all the time. There is some sort of a confession and then a recant. Let's talk a little bit about who Andrew James McGann is. McGann had recently moved from Oklahoma to Arkansas for a position with Springdale Public Schools. He was a teacher. But then the school district released a statement that said he was a teacher candidate hired for the upcoming school year, someone in the pipeline, but not yet active with students. Okay, good for the students. Terrifying that he made it past the security checks to get in the pipeline. Other outlets traced McGann's earlier work to Texas and Oklahoma classrooms, with still others reporting he had applied to additional Northwest Arkansas districts in 2025. Now, we don't have a full view of his criminal history yet, if he even has any, but it's my understanding that people have to go through psychological evaluation to be a police officer. Do we not do that for teachers? If we don't, why not? And if we do, how did he pass it? Part of the public shock about this suspect came from the collision of identities, a school teacher and a murder suspect. Reporters sprinted to find former colleagues and school records. Tabloids amplified the ugliest allegations they could locate from past classrooms. Local outlets stuck closer to the confirmation school districts were willing to provide. I'm sure everyone is very much in CYA mode right now, trying to minimize their involvement in him getting into the pipeline to become a teacher. By the 1st of August, the charges were clear. 2 counts of capital murder and related counts that can evolve as prosecutors refine the case. McGann was being held without bond. Now, prosecutors have already stated they are going to be seeking the death penalty. That could be posturing in the beginning. It could be a threat to try to get him to cooperate. An arraignment date and a preliminary hearing date started to take shape. And then, of course, there will be a lot of arguing over what statements are admissible. Is the so-called confession going to come into play? Are they going to try to have that removed from the case? If he made a confession, the only way it won't come into court is if they found out, he wasn't read his rights properly, or that he asked for an attorney and didn't get one. And of course, it sounds like they've got some DNA that will come into trial. And as we know, things don't usually go well for defendants when there's DNA evidence. The courtroom is where the narrative that began on a trail becomes a record that lasts for generations, not because it heals anything, but because it gives a community a way to say what happened. And as always, I feel very strongly about telling the victim's story. We're going to talk a little bit about the Brinks. Reports describe Cristen and Clinton as parents whose first instinct under threat was to protect, and whose final acts were directed at their daughter's survival. That's not sentimentality. That's what happened. In a brief statement shared through coverage in national outlets, relatives honored both as heroes, not because they set out to be, but because that's what love looks like under impossible pressure. These two parents chose their daughters' lives over their own. The children were placed with family, the first step on a long path no one would choose. And like I say, days after the murders, we found out that the Brinks had just recently moved to the area. They liked the schools better. Their grandparents were close by. They liked the stores. They liked the area. And then one afternoon, they decided to go hiking, and a totally random stranger took everything from them. I mean, these really are the stories of nightmares. So often here in the true crime community, when someone is murdered, if it's a woman, it's the husband. If it's the husband, it's the wife. This is pure, unadulterated, random crime. And it's terrifying. Community response followed a script any town would recognize: vigils, GoFundMe links, school counselors gearing up for hard conversations, park officials balancing the need to keep wild spaces open with the need to restore a sense of safety. Random is kind of a cruel word. It doesn't mean meaningless. People say, it wasn't a random crime, as if there's no story there. Random just describes the absence of a connection, but someone still chose this trail and that moment. Random is frightening because it humiliates our sense of safety. We tell ourselves that if we avoid certain places at certain hours, that we will be safe. If we listen to that prickle on the back of our neck, we'll be safe. And then a headline like this cracks across the country. The middle of a day, 4 people on a trail in a well-traveled park. It makes every hiking trail feel less safe. And that is sad. Statistically, state parks are still among the safest public spaces we enjoy, but statistics are cold company after a loss like this. Now, this case also has some echoes in another state park. Very quickly, detectives in South County, Wisconsin, announced that they were exploring potential parallels between the Devil's Den murders and the unsolved 2020 stabbing of hiker John Schmutzer at Devil's Lake State Park, which is Devil's Lake State Park, not Devil's Den. But this attack on John Schmutzer appears to be random as well. Journalists noted the eerie coincidence of the names of the parks. Law enforcement stressed the careful caution that governs such cross-jurisdictional comparisons. Possible connections are always questions. They're not answers. Still, investigators said they were comparing notes and checking DNA where appropriate. Now, what the results of those comparisons will be, we don't yet know. The arraignment will be procedural, but still meaningful. A not guilty plea is almost certain. That's how most of these cases start out. Expect months of filings, patient judges, impatient media and public. We can expect the defense to talk about alternative suspects, reasonable doubt, possible other conclusions. The dates will change and move. They'll set a date for trial and it will probably get moved. And if the prosecution does ask for the death penalty, it will extend the trial even further. That's kind of where everything's at right now. The people of that area of Arkansas are left to wonder, if they're safe in that park. If you go back to Devil's Den in your mind, back to the arch stone and the creek and the high summer whir, you can imagine a different day. The same trail, the same 2 girls collecting leaves, the same parents laughing at a bad dad joke or fixing a ponytail. In that day, they drive home tired and happy. In that day, they argue quietly about whether to make pasta or order pizza. In that day, the only injury is perhaps a mosquito bite. That day didn't happen. That's the nature of grief. It's a life made of days that didn't happen. The friends and the relatives of Cristen and Clinton have vowed to make sure those girls know that their parents gave their lives for theirs. Hikers will return to Devil's Den because it's beautiful. It's a well-known place. But at a trailhead somewhere, a child will bend over to tie a shoelace or run up ahead, and their parents will say, "Stay where I can see you." I think what happened to Cristen and Clinton that day will live on in a lot of people's minds for a very long time. I hope those little girls are healing in the best way that they can. I want to send love to them and to their caretakers and let them know that we are supporting them and thinking of them. I will keep you updated as this case continues and as we all hope for justice. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts from my hotel room. I'm hoping it'll just be this episode and the next one, and we're going to be home. I filmed what I thought I would need to get through this trip, and then, as is often the case, Jason ends up staying a little bit longer. He is the superintendent over these big jobs, and he doesn't leave the job site until everybody's off the job site. I think we'll be back in the studio next week. I sure appreciate you. Don't forget about my podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify, and I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. The podcast is doing gangbusters. I sure appreciate you, and I want to give a special thank you to my patrons. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Bye.